What's up, everybody? Shawn here with another live to roll for you guys. This week, we're actually going to be talking about epilepsy, kind of educating on some of that. We have some really great guests here to help us become educated as well, because we're actually not as familiar with that either, me and Bobby. So we will get into some quick intros and then let them introduce themselves and get into the topic at hand. So I am Shawn. I am a C5, C6 quadriplegic from a snowboarding accident 20 years ago. Bobby,
Mm.
you want to go ahead and then we'll let
Yeah,
these ladies.
yeah. I'm Bobby Rohan, C5, C6, as well as Shawn. 35 years ago from a cycling accident on a bicycle. And enough about, about Shawn and I. So let's turn it over to our guest and let's get to know them a little bit more. And I'll start with you, Megan. You were on first with us. And Megan, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
So my name is Megan Kennedy. I'm with Epilepsy Education Everywhere. I do live out here in California, but I'm a Marine Corps brat. I've lived from the East Coast to the West Coast. So to all the veterans out there, thank you, and of course all the Marines. Belated happy birthday to y'all too. But I've had epilepsy for 38 years. I was diagnosed back in college. The majority of the time, I have what is now referred to as uh, they keep changing the names on us, but it used to be complex partial seizures, and now it's a focal seizure with impaired awareness is now the new name for it. So now you know why it's hard to remember that, okay? Especially when those of us with epilepsy have those memory issues to begin with. But I'm sure Melanie has a lot more to add. I'll pass it on over to her, and we'll be able to tell you guys a lot more as we go on.
Can't wait.
Yes, thanks, Megan. So I am Melanie Stovall, Executive Director at the Legacy Bridges Foundation. And my connection to epilepsy is my now 22-year-old daughter who started having seizures at the age of 7, kind of no rhyme or reason, just out of the blue. And so that whole journey has kind of landed us to where we're at today. But it's definitely very challenging to navigate living with epilepsy or caring for somebody who does. And so that's why we're here to help shine a light, raise awareness, and let you all know and be informed. If nothing else, just to be informed with helpful tips that in case you have a friend, family member, somebody in your circle, classmate, employee, what have you, you'll be able to assist them and then actually be able to just check in from time to time, if you will. So thanks for having us.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you
yeah.
guys for joining us. We really appreciate you guys coming on, and it was great. I met you guys both at like a couple of different small resource fairs and stuff, which is great. That's what I've been really trying to branch out to educate more on this kind of stuff. So, do you guys want to either one of you, or both of you, take turns, kind of just giving a little bit of an? I know you kind of did a little bit, Megan, on just kind of um, for people that don't know what epilepsy is, how it affects people, and just really some like the more basic, just kind of general knowledge of it for people that might not know.
So epilepsy has actually been around for millennia, believe it or not. First noted in the Code of Hammurabi, back around what was it, 4000 BC or whatever the time frame is. I forget the exact time, so don't quote me on that part right now. But it's been around a lot longer than people realize. And over the years, there's been a lot of different changes. In fact, I found out years ago that there used to be epilepsy colonies here in the U.S. So there's a lot of history to it. But luckily, those colonies are no longer. But I was diagnosed back in college. As I said, I have the uh, focal seizure with impaired awareness. And the one thing with epilepsy is it's different with everyone. There's actually over 40 different types of seizures and seizure syndrome. So the seizures I have are going to be different than Deja seizures and everything. Um, and you can have 10 people in the room and all have different types of seizures and different types of syndromes. So I could keep on talking, trust me, but Melanie, you want to give a little bit from, especially being a parent's perspective. I can talk especially about it as an adult with epilepsy, but I didn't have it as a kid.
Yeah, yeah. No, and to Sean's point, like for us, I didn't know about it. Like I didn't know anybody in our family, friends. There was no one close to our inner circle that had epilepsy or had seizures. And it wasn't until, I got older that my aunt started having them. But as a mom who, like, my daughter and I were living life, we're doing our thing. I'm in school. I'm trying to, further my education. I'm working full time, trying to just provide for my family. And then out of nowhere, just like it probably did with Megan and a lot of other people, just out of the blue, things start changing. And that the unanswered questions, right? We have this thing happening to us. It's unexplainable. We have these feelings. The body's taking over by some force, and then now life looks different. Socially, economically, academically, like all these different things are now impacted by this, diagnosis that just kind of comes in and it bites itself to the dinner table without an invitation. Like, and so it's been a challenging journey. And I think for a lot of people, because there's no blueprint, there's not, here you go, take this, go home and implement this. So that way life looks a little bit easier. Like Megan said, it affects everybody differently. My daughter had a brain surgery that was unsuccessful, not the same for other folks. They have success with their brain surgery. So there's just so many different changes and challenges when it comes to that. But what we both like to preach is just the awareness to help eliminate the stigma, if you will. And I can talk all day too, so please interrupt.
And add on a little bit to what you said there. Like you said, it affects everyone differently, but it's one of those things that can come on at any stage in life. One of the reasons they had these colonies and everything, in fact, they used to put people in insane asylums, is because they thought it was genetic. There used to be a eugenics movement, so people with epilepsy were denied the right of marriage, or even forced to be sterilized in some states and everything. You can tell I like history and all that. Okay, but things have changed a lot, and all those rules are off the books now. Thank goodness, they've gotten those off the books. But everything, like I said, is different. So, and I just lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry about that, guys. But there was something you said, Melanie, that just really triggered all this stuff, and it was just like, go, 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 go.
What
But
happens to you?
yeah. Oh, yeah. So where I was going with this was that there are people who are born with it. There are people who develop it somewhere as a child. I developed it when I was in college. I've known people who don't develop epilepsy until they're in their 50s or 60s. So it's one of those things that can come on at any stage in life. Just as you gentlemen know, look at how your life changed when you had that accident. One of the more common things for people developing epilepsy later in life is some type of traumatic brain injury and all
Okay.
that. There's a lot of reasons people can have epilepsy. But the other thing to note is that just because you have a seizure doesn't mean you have epilepsy. We actually have
Okay.
a family friend who is going through testing right now because they're having seizures, but they don't know if it's epilepsy or not. And
Because
my college roommate, she has diabetes. When in fact she was the very first one who I witnessed having a seizure in the college dorm room, and I freaked out because I was always the one having seizures. I didn't know what to do. I was still fairly new to it at the time, and in her case, it could have been very life threatening because that meant her blood sugar was low. But diabetes, again, not everyone with diabetes, when their blood sugar gets low, has a seizure, but that's how it was for her. So there's a lot of things out there, and it's just one of those things that just like you said, like Melanie said, can just pop up at any minute.
So then, so it sounds like there's so many different variations. I believe you
Mhm.
said there's like 40 types of different epilepsies. Um, and so, you know, after you're kind of diagnosed, you're probably with this for 5, 10, 20 years. What is everybody different? And then you just discover what triggers your epilepsy? Is it just all of a sudden you just know that, oh, in these kind of situations, stressful or loud, crowded areas, that's what triggers it, is it just the same? Everybody's different like us. Shawn and I are injured at the same break, but we're both different, and we have both different triggers of different things, from bladder to bowel to body sensation to everything.
okay.
But But let's go on with, do you understand what triggers yours, or does
Mhm.
everybody find out, or some people in the unknown?
Why don't you go first, Melanie?
Thank you. Yeah, so it's again different for everyone. Like in our case, Deja, we don't know what her triggers are. The doctors can't say like, "Hey, it's you're watching too much television, or you're not resting enough, or it's these lights." Like for her, there is no specific trigger. Some people do know what their triggers are, though. So again, it's kind of different for everyone. But I did want to say the aura, though. So some folks do get the aura; they'll know when a seizure is coming on, where some others don't. It's just they have those drop tack seizures. So that aura too, like my daughter had the aura, she could let us know that she felt one coming, but then there's times where she couldn't. So it's just like really all over the place, honestly. Megan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I didn't know what my triggers were initially. I actually went through a clinical trial for one of the epilepsy meds that's out there now, back in the early to mid '90s, and during that, I had to keep a seizure diary, and it was during that time that I actually learned what a lot of my triggers are. I did learn about stress real easily in college because pretty much every time during finals week I'd have seizures. So stress I knew right away, you know? But, when I was doing that, I was able to determine some different patterns, and I was able to make some lifestyle changes, and all of that helped me out. So, for example, some of my triggers, I can make changes for. So, caffeine is a trigger for me. So that meant I'm glad I was not a coffee drinker, but that meant I had to cut out things like cherry cola and things like that. But, I also found out about alcohol being a trigger for me as well, and found out early on that, so I never really was a big drinker. But there are some changes that are triggers that you can't change. So, like for women, there's something known catamenial epilepsy, which is driven by your hormone changes. And it could be when your hormones, when you're ovulating or when you're having your period. For me, I found out the day before or the day of my period were days that I was more common to have a seizure. So, you can't change those, but I worked with my doctor, we would just change my medication around that time. So there are things that you can do once you find out those triggers, but as she said, you can have an aura. I did have an aura, but then there was a time I didn't. But not everyone has those auras, and those auras can be different for everyone. I don't know what Deja's auras are, but that's a common question I get, but it either tends to be a sudden intense feeling of fear, a weird rolling sensation over my body, or a weird metallic taste in my mouth for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually wasn't aware that there were those.
Sorry, I couldn't.
Sorry. Um, can you guys hear me?
I can hear
Okay.
you now.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I wasn't actually aware that there was trigger. Like, I actually thought they were pretty much most seizures were pretty much like unexpected. Like, people you didn't really have the warning. So that's kind of, I guess, nice that sometimes you have the warning and then you have found things that trigger it and things. Um, but yeah, no, that's great information. Thank you guys.
And
Um, and there's also no information on kind of like what can onset it either. Like, is that pretty much like you said, some people are born with it. Some people, like Deja, you said with around, you said 7, right? Is that what you said? And then like some people are in their 40s and things or 50, like later in life. Do they have? There's no information on kind of that either because that scares me a little bit.
Right. And it's interesting, like we don't try to put fear in people when we say like, it can happen to anyone, anytime, anywhere, because essentially that's true. Like you don't know what's going on in the brain that just boom, now you're having a seizure. But I think essentially like the researchers and the doctors are still trying to do all of that research to figure it out. But I think the numbers of something like 70% of the cases, like they don't have an answer. Like they just don't know what those triggers are, or how it started and all this other stuff. Like they just don't know.
and
And that's the
it,
frustrating part too for a parent. And I'm sure, for folks who are going through it.
absolutely, I can totally see that, and um, a little, I guess, a form. My daughter does have a form of epilepsy, if you really want to call it, but she has a seizure disorder called Lennox-Gastaus, and
Okay.
so
Hmm.
that so it affects very few, but and she's got the whole gamut. So you name every type, she's had them. Um, and they don't. She was 2 weeks old when they first discovered it, and um, now it's kind of controlled with CBD, and we also have VNS in her, so it stims and hopefully breaks off some of those, but she still gets them. So, has medication helped your daughter or you, Megan, um, with any type of medication, or have you ever? VNS, is that any? Do you hear a lot of people and who qualifies for something like that?
Yeah, Megan, go ahead, Easter.
Okay, and I was gonna say you brought up some good things, and sorry to hear she has LGS, but I am familiar and have met people with that as well. So the in fact, I forget if it was November 1st or November 2nd was LGS Awareness Day. Do you remember, Bobby? Or
We don't follow it that
because
much.
I know.
Yeah, she's 32, and
Oh, okay, okay,
and so we don't follow it as closely, you know, as that.
gotcha, gotcha. So no, but you brought up things like the VNS and surgery. So think of me 38 years ago. You didn't have all these options that are out there now. So technology has really changed things. I actually did consider surgery at one point. I
Mhm.
was considering it, and because I had been on almost every medication on the market at the time, but then the trial option came along, and I'm a big advocate for clinical trials. So if anyone out there is considering a clinical trial, my big hump was I'm not going to try anything that hasn't been approved. That was my big thing, you know. And then one day I just had like that little light bulb go off, and I'm like, you know what? Even when I go on a medication that's been on the market for 20, 30, even 100 years, it's a trial to me because my body is different than everyone else's. So once I made that realization, I'm like, okay, let me do the trial. If the trial doesn't work, then I'll see if I'm a surgical candidate. But while I was on the trial, not only did it work, but other medications came out on the market. So when I had to get off of it because eventually my body got used to it, I had other options to try. And I never actually did consider surgery. And because of the fact that like I said, had made those lifestyle changes, various things like that, I had gotten better control over my epilepsy. I'd gone from 6 to 8 seizures a month to 1 to 2 seizures a month. But yet, that might seem like a lot to you, but I've met people who have hundreds of seizures a day,
Mhm.
or their kids have hundreds of seizures a day. So, you put it in perspective, it's a lot to me, but in reality, it's not a lot in the overall spectrum. But the VNS has been around for, oh gosh, about 25 years now or so, late 90s.
Yeah,
They
she
now have
got
the
it early on in early 90s,
okay,
mid
okay.
95.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, and then I know now they have the RNS, which goes into the brain, and, there's, the different watch different apps. It started off with the smartwatch, and there's other apps that are out there. There's things for children who have the nighttime seizures so that the parents can be notified when they're having a seizure at night so they can go help them out, various things like that. So,
And the
it's really
dog, what about
come a
the
long way.
dog? The dogs
Oh, yes,
do.
the service dog, the seizure dog. Yes, yes.
Yes, and our dogs aren't trained in any sort, but um, I we've noticed they and all of our dogs, and we've had dogs for and like I said, my daughter's in her 30s, and every dog we've had, they start circling, and they're both different. One will hide, and one will get very agitated, where it just keeps nudging us. So, and
Ah.
then that's what Melody has usually, a seizure. So it's pretty crazy how dogs are really in
Mhm.
tune with that. So
Yeah,
how
I'm
about
going to
your
piggyback for sure.
Yeah.
yeah? How about you, Melanie, with your daughter? Medication, and does everybody with epilepsy take medication?
So for us, we did play the merry-go-round of medications. Try this, try that, try to come up with that concoction, that good mix that would help. But she's one of those rare cases that medication does not help. And so the next level was the VNS for us. So we did try the VNS. She still has it implanted. It's been since 2016. She wants it taken out though. She's every doctor's visit. She's like, "Can you get this thing out of me? It's not doing anything." So it didn't really help her at all. And then we did move forward with the brain surgery, which the night she was discharged, she started having seizures again. So the surgery was unsuccessful. But so for us, yeah, we had a dog. She just recently passed. And
Sorry.
so Deja's dog, actually, thank you.
Sorry
Deja's
about
dog
that.
had been with us for, thank you, 12 years. She'd been with us for 12 years. So since she was a baby, but she's been on this journey with us as my daughter's epilepsy kind of just came on board and she was there. So over the time, like you said, dogs just know. She would come and get me every time my daughter would have a seizure. So she just knew something wasn't right. Mommy's not okay. I need to get some help. And she would come and get me. And so they've been buddies and, inseparable ever since. And so it was a hard hit to our family to lose her. But we know all dogs go to heaven. And so we'll see her again. And yeah, the dogs are smart.
Yeah, they are. And one thing to point out, people don't always think about this, but pets can have epilepsy too.
Ah, yes. We actually had a dog who has seizures. Yes, very
Oh my,
true.
yeah. Mine had it late. We had one that later in life, but more from probably her cancer that was coming on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was probably more of it. We did have a question from our good friend Mickey, and I kind of know this answer. And it's funny when my wife would have witnessed others like at a concert venue, and everyone's like worried about their tongue. So I'll let you guys answer that. When people have heard that myth,
Swallow your
epilepsy
tongue.
might swallow their tongues. Is that true?
So
Go
you
ahead,
want to
Megan.
take. Oh, okay. It is not true. Okay. So yeah, it is not true. It's like, can you bite your tongue during a seizure? Yes, I've gotten swollen tongues from that. But um, the biggest concern though is, if you're, especially if you're laying on the ground, your tongue might block your airway. So you always want to turn someone on their side. And I'm
Mhm.
talking about what used to be referred to as the grand mal, now referred as the generalized tonic-clonic seizures, which is what most people think of when they hear of a seizure with someone shaking on the ground. That's what's typically portrayed. But again, that's not the way it always is. But when you see that, you want to make sure turn them on their side, because one, that way their tongue won't block their airway. Two, if they vomit, they're not going to aspirate or anything.
Mhm.
Put something under their head. That way, you're going to help them from hitting their head on the concrete and causing further damage. I tell people, even if all you have is your purse or your legs or something, I'm sure you'd rather have a bruise on your leg than have this person keep hitting their head on the ground. So, and then time it, talk calmly to them. Even when they're done with the seizures, keep talking calmly to them, because there's what's known as a post-ictal state, which means that in that case, the person is still recovering from the seizure. Because when we've had a seizure, our brain's been on overload, and we need that time to recover. Our brain needs a chance to get back on track.
You're
Is
kind of
is the thing.
you're kind of delirious and might try to stand up when it's probably not safe to stand up and other
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, and not necessarily that, but like I know for me, I can talk about what it's like for me. For me, like I said, with the focal seizures, if I have an aura, typically that would give me enough time to sit down and stop what I was doing and not endanger myself or anyone around me. But there were times I didn't have an aura, and I basically would tell people, if I'm having a seizure, just stay with me, walk with me, because I could be walking around. I said, but don't stop me unless maybe I'm about to, like, say, walk down a flight of stairs or walk out in front of a bus or something like that.
Okay.
But just stay with me and just don't stop me, because then my body is not going to realize you're trying to help me. So if you try and move me, I might react. And so, but like I said, if I'm going to injure myself, yeah, then you want to help me out. But otherwise, just stay with me and let me do my thing. And then when I come out of it, you're there to help me out and everything. So you want to give a little perspective from your daughter's angle, Melanie?
Yes, because what you just said is like the complete opposite for us. So I'm glad Bobby asked that question, because again, everybody's different. But I know they teach do not restrain when someone's having a seizure. Probably for that very reason, you can cause more damage or harm. But for my daughter, because she is the type that will try to get up and go do, she'll grab and reach for something that's in the, within her reach. And of course, which is not safe because she can grab and, cause some
Okay.
damage. But
Mhm.
she squeezes really hard too. So if she gets a hold of you, she's gonna squeeze the life out of you. And so I reframe her. Like over the years, I had to do that, or it would be a lot worse of a situation for us. So yeah, that's interesting. And I know some people you have to let them be. Some people are aggressive afterwards. Some people are very kind of in that delusional state, or they're just like unaware of their surroundings, and they do need that moment for the brain to get back on track. But they may not even know that they have a seizure. So that's something else too. Like when they come out of it, they don't know. They'll be like, if you ask the question, do you know what just happened? No, what's up? Like, what happened? You just had a seizure. What? I did? Like, it becomes a whole, like, I didn't even know that. So like that's another thing too. It's just, but safety overall is of the most importance, and keeping an eye on that individual. And like Megan said, asking questions, talking to them. In the hospital, a lot the nurses will like ask the patient to remember 3 words, and they'll say those 3 words during the seizures to see if once they're done and they come out of the post-ictal state that they're okay. And if they don't, respond appropriately, then they probably know they need to look into the situation a little further.
Yeah. It's interesting because my daughter has no verbal. She's still, in her 30s, is still, like a 1 year old or younger, and doesn't have verbal communication. So hearing, somebody else having seizures and what it's like after is very interesting. Uh, One question I'm sure uh, you might be asked this a lot, and Megan, this started happening to you in college, and Melanie, it sounds like your daughter's about to drive. So are you able, Megan, are you able to drive? Is driving an option? What is that? Or is or probably just like everything, everybody's different.
Right, yeah, and every state is different on their rules with the, driving. When I was first diagnosed, I was actually in Wisconsin in college, but my family lived in Colorado, so the rule there, I believe, was 3 months seizure-free. So, it didn't really affect me as much at that point because I was in college, and you're walking around campus, walking around the area, that kinda thing. And by the time I was home for the summertime, I was able to go in and get my license with the doctor's approval. Um, but then I got to a point where the doctor said, because one day when I was driving to work, for some reason, instead of turning left, I said, "Oh, I'm gonna go right this way." Well, right was like 3 miles out of the way, and I don't know why I turned right, but I did, and I'm glad I did because the next thing I know is I'd gone almost 2 miles pulling up to a stop sign, so I had a seizure while I was driving,
Wow.
and this is back in my early to mid-20s, and, of course, you're still like, "Oh, no, I'll be okay," kinda stuff, but a week or 2 later, I had the appointment with the doctor, and as expected, he said, "Okay, yeah, you're not driving anymore." Because the reason he let me drive was I was having my auras. This time, I didn't have an aura, and if I had gone the other way, I would have been driving through traffic, probably driving through stoplights, because we were on the east end of town or west end of town, so I was going around away from everything. So, I just lucked out that I took a right turn instead of a left turn that day.
Yeah.
But I went 9 years without a license. I moved to California without a license. People thought I was crazy. My motto then was bike, bus, carpool, walk, and now you can add in things like Uber, Lyft, or even dial a ride and stuff like that to it. But I went 9 years without a license. I've now had it for over 20 years, so
Nice.
and, my doctors have I've been able to keep it ever since then, so thank goodness things have been very good for a long time. As Melanie mentioned before about finding that right drug cocktail, it took me 12 years to find the right drug cocktail, and every now and then we gotta change it, and I have to fight for my medications because insurance says we're not gonna cover that, but you fight for it, and you do what you have to.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Congratulations on the
Yes.
getting back to driving and being so for so long here. But wow, that is scary to have gone 2 miles without like that's a
Yeah.
so yeah.
Like
So
I said,
Melanie, yeah. So Melanie, what's your experience then? Are you nervous or looking forward to? Are you hoping that Deja will be able to drive and continue to drive, and or are you just a little nervous about it? How do you feel about the everything?
Yeah, I honestly wish I could experience that emotion. But for us, so Deja had this brain surgery in 2017, and about a year later, we started to see this decline in her mobility. So where she used to be able to just get up and go, that started to look a little different to where her legs just kind of gave out. And now she's no longer mobile. So she's the lower extremities, um, for some reason don't work. They're like spaghetti legs, spaghetti noodles. But so life for us with driving is not a thing. And it's interesting, like kind of going through the different stages of transition from being a young child, toddler to being like a youth, a teen, and then to an adulthood for her. And so all these different milestones in life that we kind of come to where like all of our other close friends, their kids are going off to college and they're driving and they're doing all those things. Well, for us, that's not our reality right now. And so I'm the chauffeur. I drive her around. She's my passenger. What do you call it? Where she's always like, "Mom, watch out for that. Mom, be careful here. Look at there over there." And I'm like, "Hey, who's the one driving? Do you want to get in the driver's seat?" Like I would love to sit back, right, and be chauffeured around. That's like a mom's dream. Like, but yeah, so she's my backseat driver, I guess, but from the passenger seat.
I
So it's
but for you, or for your daughter, I should say, I I read an article. I want to say about maybe a month ago or longer. Kids don't want to drive anymore.
right.
Uh, they're late on getting, and I've heard it in personal, by personal accounts. And my grandson, he's got a few more years, but he's like, I don't want. Why would I want to drive? He's like, and it's just like, are you like that was the first thing when we were all younger, like when is this gonna happen? I'm 16 and my mom and dad said, well, did you have your money? And no, I had to wait until 16 and a half for $500 more before I could afford any type of car. So, so you might be lucky. And like you said, now with so many options out there, um, it's pretty easy to get around. And we have a great guest and personal friend that comes on, and he knows who's a quadriplegic like us. And I'll meet him in Huntington Beach, where I live near, and he's there at 8 o'clock in the morning. He got
From
there
Riverside
from Riverside, and
on
so
public transportation. Like
yeah, so
he'll go to downtown LA. He goes all over through Orange County, LA, up through everywhere. He literally travels all through Southern California, down to San Diego, like all over the place. And he's
yeah.
just gotten really used to using the transit systems.
Good for him. That's
But
awesome.
I say,
Leon in our
for
chat asked,
tourism, good for him.
Leon in our chat asked, and I know Bobby mentioned your daughter uses CBD, but he asked if cannabis works for seizures, CBD or otherwise, if it helps at all. I've heard CBD can help with seizures, but I don't know firsthand how that works. So
I will say this, that there has been success for some people with it. I remember that story some time ago with the little girl. I think it was in Oregon with the Charlotte's Web, that whole thing. Uh,
mhm.
yeah, and then so some people do try it, but when you ask the doctor about it, they're going to say no, right? Because they're against anything that's against pharma. so so they do tell you though that if you try it, it has to be like outside of their recommendation, and you're kind of taking a risk because you don't know how much to take and how little to take, and all these different variables, and it's kind of out of their control. So for us, I believe some time ago we tried. There's a what is it called? It's Epidiolex, I believe. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I can say the name of medication, but that one is like a drug approved type of CBD for epileptics. And so we tried that some time ago. I don't really know if we had much success with it because, again, of all the other medications she was on at the same time. So if we had pulled her off of everything else cold turkey and tried it, maybe we could have seen a different result. But then the doctor said we couldn't do that because of her type of epilepsy. So there's just so many different, factors that go into that. But I've heard some success stories for some people, but then they still have seizures though.
Well, didn't Bobby mention that his daughter is on CBD?
They use CBD, yeah.
It is. It's the first FDA one approved for
Oh,
seizure.
that's probably what Melanie was just talking about, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had couldn't, my bladder didn't last as long as I thought it was going to be today. But yeah, he is on the first one that, and she still has them. You know, I mean, it wasn't foolproof. And in some ways, it kind of, she had the ones that when she was younger or before it, she would laugh for like a half an hour straight. Just, but it's a seizure because she was just laughing at the top of, or she'll just get so giggly and then just take off running, and then eventually collapse with ground mal seizure. So I mean, you just knew, like, you're happy that she's happy, but it just, her brain just going da, 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 da.
So
And now,
I want to add a couple things here. So just one to just clarify. So in case anyone hears, we're talking about going out and smoking marijuana. We're talking about CBD, cannabidiol, which is where they've extracted certain things from the marijuana. So it's the one that doesn't get you high. It's like a tincture. To note, there are, yes, the medical arena has been against it, but there are doctors out there who are, leaning the other way. I actually was at a conference probably about 6 or 8 years ago, and with a lot of researchers and everything at it. And I will admit, I was concerned about, especially giving CBD to a child. I'm like, what's this going to do to them? That was my concern. And they had a panel at this event where they had various people, including representatives from Realm of Caring. So, I'm with Epilepsy Education Everywhere. Melanie's with Legacy Bridges. There's numerous epilepsy organizations out there, and some of them focus on something specific, such as Realm of Caring, which is the ones that were based around Charlotte's Web, as she mentioned earlier. And so if you want to learn more about that, that might be a place for you to start. But the parent, the mom, was telling her story about things with her daughter, and how her daughter, I can't remember the exact numbers, but she had like this PowerPoint that had like 3 different circles on it, and one of them was the number of seizures her daughter had before having the CBD, and then the number of seizures her daughter had after CBD, and pictures of her before and after. And before, she was just like listless and everything with all the medication on, and afterwards she would actually have some seizure-free days. And it was that quality of life that it was giving her. And I remember asking the parent afterwards, I said, well, what about giving them, how it's going to affect them? And she said, well, what's the difference between giving them this or a medication? You don't know how it's going to affect their body. And it's like, once that parent told me that, I was like, okay, now I have no problems recommending it as an option for parents to talk to their doctors, or for even adults to talk to the doctors about. The one thing is, you always want to make sure and talk with your doctor, because even if you're taking CBD, it could interact with your medications. You don't know how it's going to interact. So you always want to be honest with your doctor is the big thing. You want to be honest with them, because they can't help you properly if you're not. And the other thing that came out at that, I believe it was that same conference, was a doctor had done a study where they'd gone to a store and taken different CBD oils off and done a test on them. So the CBD oils all had different measurements of CBD, and he said none of them had the exact measurement that it said it was supposed to. So it's not regulated. So that's why things like this are we allowed to say medication names on here or not?
Yeah, no, that's fine. You're fine.
So the Epidiolex, as she said, is one that is approved and it is regulated and everything. So that might be something to consider trying because it is out there and FDA approved if people want to consider going that route versus not sure if they're going to get the same from bottle A to bottle B to bottle C,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And we were scared for good friends of ours that they did their own oil and made their own capsules, and it was like, ooh, I mean, not telling your doctor, it just we were nervous. She wasn't, but that was something she did and felt comfortable with it for her son. Um, I did. Oh, I had a big question. Darn it. Um, oh, the moon, full moon. Do you have either one of you seen or experienced the full moon coming on? Our body is 70% water. We've noticed it with our daughter. So when she gets really quiet, we kind of go like this, and yep, it looks like we're coming up to a full moon. So didn't know if you experienced any of that or heard
I
of it.
don't. I have not actually.
I haven't. Are you talking about? Do you mean how if the moon phases affect the epilepsy, or do you mean just something about how our bodies are reacting to when we have
To
a
affect
seizure?
the epilepsy with the seizures. Yeah, it affects my daughter's seizures. We can tell she has bigger seizures during full moon phases than not.
Huh. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I've never heard that before, but again, it's that whole thing with everyone's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like I
So
hear you in
I-
different every day.
I'm sorry, you froze there for a second. So sorry, I don't know what you heard and what you didn't hear, but I haven't heard it, so it's something new.
And you were saying something, Melanie?
Yeah, I was saying like every day I feel like I learn or hear something new that I had not ever heard before. So that's a new one for me actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Looks like we lost Megan for a second. Maybe just a little internet
Did you have
issue.
any questions, Shawn?
A lot of that was a lot of my questions was more like, yeah, how it affects. Or actually, I did have another question on my list. I know. Are you familiar with like? Well, obviously, Bobby's daughter has another seizure disorder. Are there a lot of other seizure disorders that do affect people similarly? Do some of them get lumped into epilepsy, or or are they all very like different? Because I don't really know what the differences are on how epilepsy affects people versus another seizure disorder. Was one thing I.
Yeah. So essentially, it just boils down to the testing. So, what the doctors finding the results and then establishing some type of diagnoses based on the testing. So, like she mentioned, it could be an individual who gets in a car crash and then now they start having seizures because of some brain trauma or what have you. So, that puts them in a different type of category once possibly diagnosed. But like she said, there's 40 different variations and 4 different types of seizures. And so, it looks different for different people, and then the auras, everything, all of it kind of looks different. But based on the testing and the results, then that diagnoses come, and then that's where the epilepsy is kind of different from seizures because now the person is diagnosed with having reoccurrent seizures and not just a one-off here or one-off there.
Okay, so that's the main thing for is the reoccurring. So if you're having reoccurring, it's going to qualify under epilepsy on one of the categories. Okay,
Right. Like if somebody just had one seizure, doctors aren't going to immediately say, let's do an EEG, let's give you some medication. Like they need to see more of more activity, I think, before you're even probably, referred to a neurologist. So it just kind of depends, I think, on the, case by case, person, situation by situation, that type of thing.
okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like as I mentioned, my college roommate Marla with her diabetes, yeah, she's had seizures during her lifetime, but that doesn't mean she has epilepsy. She's having the seizures because of her diabetes and the blood sugar being low. And luckily she's gotten that under control over the years and everything too. So people can have seizures but not have epilepsy, and that's when they refer to it as a non-epileptic seizure.
Okay.
A lot of children out there are going to have what's known as a febrile seizure, which is brought on simply by high temperature, but it's not an epileptic seizure.
What
So
was it?
that's why if someone doesn't have a history of epilepsy, you want to call 911 because something else could be going on with their body.
Yeah.
You know.
That's good to know. Yeah, definitely.
I was
It,
on UC Davis Health of, you know, frequently asked questions. Um, EEG. Have you gone through it, Megan, or has your daughter, Melanie?
Mhm. Yeah, so she's
Yes.
probably experienced an EEG more than 20 times in her life. Like
And do you want to
she's pretty,
explain what that is
yeah,
for everybody else?
sure, sure. So it's a form of testing where they connect um, these electrodes to the brain with some really, it used to be smelly paste. I think now with all the technology, they've been able to make some paste that doesn't smell so awful. But it's like this sticky paste that they connect all these electrodes to the brain and they put the cap on. And so all the wires are connected to the system or this machine that's reading all of the brain waves. So anytime there's different spikes and different activity going on in the brain, the screen is picking up that activity, and the doctors can read all that. It kind of looks like this bar back here, it's just like all these waves of different activities, and that's where you see kind of like the earthquake, the seismograph. It kind of looks like that, like there's an earthquake happening in the brain. You're seeing like all these lines and things of activity happening, and so from that they read hours and hours of the film and they determine, when the seizure happened. And in cases, the patient can press the button when they, or the caregiver who's with them can press a button to highlight that specific area when the seizure is taking place. So that way the doctors can go to that spot, that time, and say, okay, yeah, this is the activity we saw. And they can dissect it and kind of determine some results after that. But that test is, I mean, for her, my daughter, it was not the best. Like having to be in the hospital. Well, actually, she kind of liked being in the hospital because she gets to order room service. Any food, any meal, like she liked being there. All the games, the entertainment, and all that stuff. But it's just kind of like daunting, just sitting there. And you're sitting there, and you're waiting as a parent or the caregiver, and you're like just kind of watching your loved one as they sit there and waiting for a seizure to happen, or if the seizures are provoked because the doctors want to catch that data, then you're kind of sitting there because you can't do anything. There's nothing you can really do as a caregiver or parent to stop the seizure. So you're just kind of watching as the test is happening. But it's all of that data at the end that the doctors collect and dissect that kind of makes the situation a little bit more understandable, I guess, for them at least.
okay.
It's kind of like the EKG of your heart in a lot of sense of finding out, to find those irregular parts of what's going on, either the brain or the heart.
But yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah.
no, that is.
And then the second one was kind of I've heard of EEG, but what is the WADA test? Wade test? I'm sorry, Wade.
Okay.
WE. Do you know what that is by any chance?
WADA.
Yeah, WADA.
WADA test. They don't. Melanie, did Deja ever do a WADA test?
Um,
Okay, so I haven't done a WADA test. A WADA test is something they typically do when someone's going to be having surgery. So they might have done it, maybe you didn't realize it, because what it is I had a friend who went through who did the WADA test to see if he was a candidate, and but they're like doing things while you're awake to determine where the seizures are coming from, because they don't want to shut down or cut out a part of the brain that's causing you to breathe or something like that. So sometimes people fail that WADA test because where it's originating, the seizure, where the seizure is originating from in the brain is a central part to their lifestyle. So then they're like, okay, we're not doing surgery because of this. I never went that way, but typically when they're going to be diagnosing you, they're going to be doing blood tests. And it's not that there's a blood test for epilepsy, but it's that they're trying to rule out other options that could be going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to be doing the EEG. My first I EEG. I actually remember an EEG when I was 4 years old. Believe it or not, I didn't have epilepsy, but I did have febrile seizures back then, and that's when they had the really bad glue on the head. Now they luckily have more of a gel, which is much easier to get out of your hair. And they also now have 24-hour EEGs where you can take home and do the EEG. And I did one of those last year for the very first time ever.
Mm,
So they got a full 24 hours versus just like an hour. But they do everything in that short time to stimulate a seizure, including putting on the strobe lights and all that too, which can affect some people with epilepsy. And then they'll do either a CT or an MRI, or maybe even both, depending on what's going on, because they're looking at your brain to see if there's something, like maybe you might have a brain lesion or a brain tumor or something that could be causing the seizure. So there's a lot of different things that they can do when determining whether you have epilepsy or not. But basically what they do is, if you're having those recurring seizures and they've ruled out every other option and you're still having those seizures, then they determine it as epilepsy.
mm. Yes, the technology has probably come so far for how to dissect our brains and really understand um, everything about it. In the sense, my wife 2.5 years ago had a because we've been talking epilepsy. She had she had a blood clot, a stroke, um, in her head,
Okay.
and yeah, and luckily it didn't kill her. Luckily, it was a slow one that was causing it. So luckily, but the way they read it and how they can read it each and every year to make sure what they put, which was coils inside, to keep it from the bleed and happening again, is just amazing. And to look at the imaging is just, they're like, oh, you see it here, and I'm like, everything looks the same to me. I don't see how you can find. And they're like, no, it's right there. Still don't see it, but okay, I'll believe you.
That's why you have your specialists out there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we're wrapping. We're going to need to wrap up here soon, but for everybody
Yeah.
out there um, watching now or in the future when they see this, um, and I think I've seen a few. My wife and I have witnessed, and tell them no, they're not going to swallow their tongue, and they've been mad at us because we said back away, back away. So, what should you do if you see others having a seizure?
Go ahead, Megan.
Oh, I was waiting for you to go. Well, I sort of answered that earlier. Where
Yeah.
What'd you say, Bob?
Go ahead, Megan. You start. Go ahead.
Well, I sort of mentioned earlier about putting people on, turning them on their side, putting something under their head, timing it. If you know they have, if you don't know if they have epilepsy, go ahead and call 911, because as we've mentioned, there could be other reasons for the seizure. But if they do have epilepsy, typically the rule of thumb is 5 minutes. So if the seizure is lasting more than 5 minutes, or if the seizures come and go and come and go and come and go, call 911, because maybe it's something else that's going on with them then. Because typically by the time emergency gets there, the seizure is going to be gone. They're going to be in their postictal state, and they really, isn't much that they can do when they could be helping someone else in trouble. So the best thing I tell people to do is, if you know someone with epilepsy, ask them, what do you want me to do when you have a seizure? Because they know what they know their systems, they know what their family or their friends do. They know what needs to get done. If with work, when I have a new job, I say, hey, I have epilepsy, what do you want to do? And sometimes they've had me educate them. Sometimes they just have me send a quick email out for people to come ask questions. So those are some things that people can do to help educate others, whether it be on their own or to learn for helping other people should it happen.
That's great.
That's good information. Melanie, do you have anything else to add to, like, if yeah, that sounds like pretty solid information for what to do. And also, I was gonna say, like, say if the person is on their own and you don't know if they have epilepsy, should you wait for a while, or should you just call 911 because you don't know, and it's probably just the safest bet?
If you don't know, call 911.
Yeah, that's kind of what I
Safest,
was
play it safe,
doing.
call
But
911 if you don't know, but you,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's those cases where, say it's a friend of yours and they have epilepsy, or you see they have a medical bracelet and it says epilepsy, then you at least know already, so.
Oh, okay.
And of
Yeah.
course, I know some places, if it's at work or something, they're required to call just because that's the protocol. That might be the case. So,
Yeah, I can see some places like, no, we're calling. I don't care what you say. We're taking our side of the caution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say really quick though, just for
Yeah.
people
right,
who are living with epilepsy or seizure disorder, do share, like do tell, don't be afraid. I know the stigma, a lot of people are afraid to tell, folks close to them or their employers, friends like that, but it could save your life, essentially. So I think it's important that we no longer be afraid to
right.
talk about our story and to share our information so that way it protects and it saves us. And then just letting people know like you're not alone. There's millions of people out here living with, epilepsy and a seizure disorder. And so connecting, talking to people, having that relationship with someone who understands your journey is also very therapeutic. And so I just like to promote self care and awareness so that way we can live our best lives because life is short. And so we want to make sure that people are taking full advantage of the resources that exist and that they're connecting with other people so that way they don't feel alone and isolated on this journey.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
And also, I have
most of
both of your guys' websites, the Legacy Bridges and Epilepsy Education Everywhere, as well as Epilepsy Foundation's website. I linked into the description. So if anybody does want to look up more information, please click the links below and check out the information. Educate yourself if you know anybody, that suffers from or that deals with epilepsy in their daily life, or just to be educated so if you ever run into something in the future. So, um,
and this is Epilepsy Awareness Month. I think we
yeah,
mentioned that at the beginning, but get out there, wear purple, go to our Facebook or Instagram pages, share something so that other people can learn, help us spread the word. How's that? But as Melanie said, don't, no matter what, and if it's not epilepsy, but anything you have going on, reach out to people, talk to people about it, because that's the best thing you can do is to educate other people as well as have that support group for yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm sure somebody, might know because I'm reading here how common is epilepsy. In the United States alone, about 3.4 million people have epilepsy.
Yeah, and to 1 in 10 will develop 1 in 10 will have a seizure, 1 in 26 will develop epilepsy in their lifetime. As I said, 3.4 million in the US alone. And I see differing statistics for worldwide, but between 50 to 65 million worldwide.
It says here on the 50 million and plus, and that's what it put 50
Yeah.
million plus.
wow, yeah. So definitely a lot of people out there that are dealing with it. So definitely educate yourself and share the information, like Melanie said. That's what we're all about here at Live to Roll. Education, sharing information, trying to lean on each other as a community
Right.
support. So that's best for all
And we say,
communities.
get your purple on.
I was gonna say I got my purple shirt in the background. We
Get
put
your
the purple Real Strong family. I got green one on
all
for
right. Yeah. Well,
for my spinal cord injury though too. So we got both represented.
but
But
there we
yeah.
Thank
go. Go. I was gonna say purple on, and for those in the area, the M in Moreno Valley will be purple on November 15th for Epilepsy Awareness Month. How's that?
Oh, that's
This,
cool. Very
this
cool. That's
Okay,
great to
great.
hear.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you both so much for having us. It was a pleasure being here. We appreciate this
Right here
opportunity.
again.
You both are amazing. Thank you so
thank
much.
you guys. And real
Well,
quick
I
before we
know, and good to see you again, Melanie. Too. Hey, yay!
let's stick around. Hold on. We got a couple of seconds. We're going to thank our sponsor. You want to
yeah,
go
real
ahead?
quick, we're going to thank our sponsors. Yeah, thanks, Bobby. Thank you to our sponsors, Mobility Professionals and Urology Professionals. Mobility Professionals is a DME company in Southern California. So if you need any durable medical equipment like a wheelchair, standing frame, commode chair, anything like that, please contact them and they can help you out anywhere in Southern California. They'll help take care of insurance, switching over and everything, getting everything taken care of. And then Mobility Professionals is their sister company, and they are nationwide. So if you need catheter supplies, any urological supplies, anywhere in the country in the U.S., please contact them. They can ship them straight to your door. They will take care of everything again, customer service, insurance, and everything. Just great company. They support the community locally as well. So we're just very grateful for our sponsors. So thank you. And thank you everybody also that's watching now, that's going to watch after, engaging in the chat. We appreciate you guys coming and checking us
Absolutely.
out. And then on Thursday this week, Bobby will be back actually with Robert and Luis doing a Rolling Over the Hill episode talking about
Actually,
aging the disability.
unfortunately, I won't be there this week.
Oh, that's right.
But Robert's gonna take care of the fort with Louise, and then hopefully we'll have our good friend from Mobility Professionals and Urology Professionals, Dean
Oh, Gene.
McCabe. Hopefully, we'll be joining. Unfortunately, I have I retired before my boss retired, and now it's her time to retire. So I'm going to her retirement party, and I will not be able to make this show. But I'm sure whatever Robert puts together is going to be a great show.
All right. So check that out. I'm actually looking forward to the Robert and Luis. That'd be fun. They're always fun hosting, doing their thing. And then we'll be back next Tuesday as well for another live show. And next week we actually have guest Gretchen, another quad that's coming on. We're going to talk about community and that importance of that. So like we were just talking about here, all the disability community, supporting community, it is very important and such a great resource for anybody with a disability or anybody looking for information about anything they're dealing with. So make sure to check us out on next Tuesday for that. Yeah, thank you guys both again for being here.
Yes.
Really appreciate you guys coming on and educating us. So look forward to seeing you guys in the future at some of these local Inland Empire events out here with me. So
or maybe even Abilities Expo that happens in, I believe, March of
we
next
actually
year.
have a booth. I got it reserved, so
Nice.
we will definitely be there. Hopefully, you guys as well. But all right, yes, thank you everybody again for watching. We appreciate you guys. Thank you guys again for educating us, and we'll see you guys next week. Live to roll.
All right.